Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you for taking the time out to have a listen to this webinar. I appreciate everybody's time is precious these days, so it's no light thing to sort of take almost an hour out of your day. My name is Mark Kelly. I'm involved in the AEC Solutions side of things, AEC Techie, based in the Cadgroup Brisbane office. Now, I know how much everybody loves PowerPoints, so I won't make this a very long-winded PowerPoint by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just going to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about in the next little while. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about Revit XT. What exactly is it? What will it do for you if you're not already using it, of course? Who's eligible to get hold of it? What's the process of getting hold of it and installing it? We'll just have a quick discussion about that as well. And then I'll just give you a brief overview in this PowerPoint. And then I'll give you an actual live demonstration of it as well. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end if anybody's got any questions. Okay, so what's Revit XT Tools all about? Well, it's essentially, I guess, a set of productivity tools. So it's designed to have something in there basically for any Revit user, and that includes people who are using Revit for, I guess, all sorts of different purposes. There's actually two tabs that get added into Revit when you install the Revit XT tools, one of which is just called Revit.xt, and that one is, I guess, more for general Revit users. And then there's another tab which is probably not going to be used by as wide an audience of people, which is designed more for BIM managers and people who are creating content in Revit. So people who are interested in adding customized parameters into Revit or interrogating the Revit database in more detail. So who's actually eligible to get hold of Revit XT? If you own Revit, the full Revit, or if you own a copy of any suite or collection which has Revit in it, and you're on active subscriptions with Cadgroup, then you're eligible for one copy of Revit XT for each copy of Revit that you own. Now, I say full Revit. The only reason I say it that way is because, unfortunately, the Revit LT, the Revit Lite version, doesn't allow for third-party add-ons to be installed. So that means, as much as we'd love to, unfortunately, there's no point in us, I guess, giving you a copy of Revit XT if you have Revit LT, because effectively you can't use it. Procurement. How do I get hold of it? Well, if you haven't already received an email saying that you've got some licenses of Revit XT, then just shoot an email or a phone call perhaps to your business development manager and let them know that you'd like to get hold of it. You'll receive an email which has a link to the latest build. That link that you'll find in that email will always be the location of the latest build. So when the new version of Revit XT gets rolled out, then that link will always be the one that you'll use. You'll also have your serial number and the product key in there. Installation of Revit XT is very, very simple. It essentially involves downloading the installer, running the installer, and when it installs itself, it will automatically add itself as an add-in to the current version of Revit plus the previous 3 versions, which is in line with your subscription benefits. So you've got Revit 2017, 16, 15, and 14. They'll all automatically update themselves. As per other installations of Revit add-ons, always a good idea to shut down Revit, all copies of Revit before you do the installations. For larger companies that have a rollout of very large quantities of Revit XT. We can also talk to you about the ability to do silent installs of the program. We can also show you how to use a license file rather than activating each copy manually. If you're in a smaller office, installing it's not as a big a task. But if you've got a very large company and you need to roll it out to say 50 or 100 seats, then obviously using an automated activation procedure like using a license file has great advantages. So we can talk to anybody who feels that they would like to roll it out in that manner. Generally speaking, though, it's just a question of activating it on a machine. Just a word of advice: if you do plan on, for example, if you buy a new laptop to replace an old laptop, just make sure that you deregister the software on the machine that you're not using anymore, so that you can reactivate it on the new machine. Okay, so the general Revit XT tab, as I mentioned before, has the sort of general usage tools, and then that more specialized tab is the content admin kit. And we'll have a very quick look at the content admin kit, but we'll spend, I think, the great bulk of the time looking at the Revit XT general tab. Revit XT tab is separated up into different sections. You've got the BIM Manager tools. So the BIM Manager tools, there's a thing called the MultiType Editor, which we'll have a look at first off, and that allows you to look at all the different family types within a family together, which is very, very handy, as you'll see, and make edits to those different properties. There's the BIM Query tool, which I think is a pretty cool tool. We'll have a look at how that works. There's then family management tools, so we'll have a look at those and how they can help you to manage families in your project. There's a QA/QC set of tools which essentially allow you to, when you're doing your documentation, for example, identify any categories of objects in a view that haven't been tagged. But I think probably the more powerful tool is the project cleanup tool. If anybody's ever been in a situation where someone's imported in an AutoCAD file, for example, and committed the unpardonable sin of exploding it, they'll know how horribly messy things can get inside Revit, and trying to strip all of those extraneous line styles, text styles, and so forth out of the project can be. Project cleanup is a way of speeding up all those tasks. It also allows you to strip out stuff that is otherwise quite difficult to get out of the database. So we'll have a look at that. The analysis tool, probably aimed more towards structural users, but is also applicable to architectural users as well. But the analysis tools allow you to add in parameters so that you can inspect the thickness of a slab, for example. And we'll have a look at how that works as well. There's also a section called Annotate Tools. So import spreadsheet, exclamation mark. The reason for the exclamation mark is because, again, that's another one of those tools which I think is very, very powerful. So we'll have a look at that, the ins and outs of how that works, and see whether that is of any interest to you. The Align tools, there's a series of Align tools which are quite handy for aligning viewports and so forth, and bits of text which would otherwise be very hard to do in Revit. And then capitals to lowercase and vice versa. It's a very simple little tool that just allows you to do exactly, I guess, what it's called. Renumbering, there's a number of different ways of renumbering things in Revit XT. So for example, I can take all my doors and automatically renumber them based on the room that they're in. So we'll have a look at that. You can also manually pick the order that you renumber stuff in, which is quite handy. There's a renumber grid tool, and so we'll have a look at those as well. Legend by category, that's another really good tool. So there's the age-old problem of a legend is not in any way connected to quantities in the model, and then of course you've got your schedule, and then getting graphic images of your objects in a schedule is quite a painful task. So a legend by category is a hybrid that actually has images of your objects as you would expect in a legend. It also allows you to use schedulable values as you would any sort of schedule, and it also has the quantities, which is, I think, the most important thing there. So it's a hybrid between the two. Okay, there's a few modify tools. There's some room tools, which I think will perhaps be of great interest to people, so we'll have a look at those. Multijoin tool, which may be of some interest, but the view tools are actually quite good. So, for example, I can use the view tool in Revit XT to automatically generate a plan view and elevation views of all of the rooms that are in my model. So we'll have a look at that in operation. The selection tools are an enhancement of the selection tools in Revit. So for example, there's a modular selection tool that allows me to go through and select individual elements based on a whole heap of criteria. And as I do them, as I make those selections, then my model updates dynamically. So I can actually see the net result of my selections or filtering of my selections as I'm making them. There's also a really good filtering tool, which actually, when I've made a whole selection, as you know in Revit, the filter tool allows me to filter out walls, floors, and so forth. The filter tool in Revit XT actually allows you to go right the way down to a family by family basis. So that's very, very powerful. We'll have a quick look at the Content Admin Kit tab and just show you very briefly some of the things that it's capable of doing. So you've survived the PowerPoint. Congratulations. So I think now would be a good time to actually look at some of these tools. I'm just going to work from left to right, just progressively all the way through these tools, just to give you an idea of what they can actually do. Okay, so what we've got here, first of all, is an import and an export tool. So if I wanted to export all of my families out of my project database, that's something I can do in Revit already, but this tool actually allows me to individually pick families rather than dumping all of the families out of the project. So that's a little bit of an enhancement. This tool, though, is really good because what it allows me to do, if, say, for example, someone in the office is a content generator and they've generated a whole heap of new families, if I go to the folder where they've placed them, I can actually pick individual families here and then get right the way down to this graphical level to pick which ones I want to load in, pardon me, and then that will actually allow me to overwrite the properties of those families. So again, that's something that's possible to do in Revit using the reload family command in the project browser, but this is just a really nice enhancement of that. Okay, MultiType Editor. Well, what does this do? Let me just have a quick look here at something that's perhaps applicable. Something with a few different, doing well, aren't I? Okay, Ottoman. So you see here, if I hold the control key and click on those two different family types, I get the parameters of each one popping up. Now, it is useful to have this information side by side if I'm doing some changes to my families. It also allows me to do a duplicate, which is not really all that spectacular, but by doing that, I've now added that one into the list of things that I can inspect. So again, it's just a nice, neat little way of managing multiple families in one hit, and I can push in new parameters here, and then that will, okay, I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but that will now push that into the database. If I look at those families, that information will be updated. This one here is that was one of the tools here that I mentioned before, which I find quite exciting. Okay, let's just for example say that we want to have a look at all of the doors that are available in the project. You can see here that I can pick from instance and type parameters. Let's just pick everything and click OK. So here I've got all of my door families. You can see that there's multiple tabs as well that give me different bits of information. But here's the information about all of my door families that are in the model. A few things to note. I've got grey here, which basically tells me that those values are read only. I can't change them. You can see here I've got a whole heap of marks. So if I wanted to, for example, go through and sort of logically change that information here, I can do that. And if I hit apply, you can see that it shows me in green that information has been applied. Now that's probably not really all that exciting in isolation, this sort of tool, but if I hit save Excel and then go into Excel and open up that spreadsheet, you can see here where it's starting to perhaps get a little bit more interesting. You can start to do stuff in here in Excel as well. So if I just make some changes to those values and then we'll save, come back into Revit, and then I'll open up, effectively overwrite this one. So you can see those values now I've updated, and hit apply, and when it's in bold green, that effectively means that the change has been properly applied. One of the interesting things is, you can also change these as presets. So if you wanted to, you can save a preset for walls, for example, to save you redoing this every time. One of the interesting things you can do is you can actually affect moves to objects by changing these values. So if you change that there, I can go apply with location. And so what that will have done is moved that wall. I think it's visible in my plan view. You can also go apply and close, which effectively hits the apply button and then closes it. So that's an interesting, there it is. Actually, that's the one that moved. So I hit the undo button. Is that, not sure if it's actually undoing it. Okay, so that's quite an interesting tool. So perhaps some of you may be looking at that, thinking of some possibilities. Just very quickly too, there is an interesting thing in this, in that it actually allows me to interrogate the database in a way that isn't actually available through the normal parameters. So for example, I can use this tool to identify the base height of an actual piece of duct. So it gives me information that may not necessarily be available normally through looking at the parameters of an actual object. Okay, project cleanup, material cleanup, for example. I mentioned this. This is a really quick way of going through and just getting rid of any of the materials that you don't want in your project. If you, again, if you've got these sort of horrible AutoCAD imports, then you can purge that out of the project. And then you've got other things for text. Subcategories, in fact, you can even purge unused subcategories out of your project, which is a nice, elegant way of getting rid of ones that aren't being used. So that's a pretty good tool. Again, if you've ever been involved in purging the Revit model of any of this sort of stuff, I think you'll realize how powerful that might be. QA, if I just zoom out a little bit here, So I want Revit to show me all the untagged walls, for example. I'll just repeat that one. Show me all my untagged doors. Try that again, sorry. Well, they're all tagged, so of course they're not going to show up. Yeah, so that's perhaps a little bit of a useful tool, maybe, for someone who's involved in tagging objects. Some of these other tools here, the insertion and length and thickness tools, again, probably mainly aimed at perhaps structural people. These ones here, though, probably more towards the architecture side of things. If I click on this floor here, you'll note that the thickness of the floor is here under the type parameters, default thickness. I can't see it here under the instance parameters. So what this tool will actually do is, if I try that again, if I go here, thickness, I can actually pick total thickness and bottom elevation and top elevation, and it's now reporting it here in the instance parameters, and I should be able to schedule that as well. So that's a pretty powerful little thing there. So if I selected all my floors in my entire project and ran that thickness command, that information would be pushed in to those. Okay, visibility. This is really aimed at people who are using structural and also people who are using rebar. So these are some little tools that have been added in just to facilitate visualizing rebar inside slabs and walls and so forth. Import spreadsheet. This is another one that I think could definitely be of some interest to a lot of people. So if I open up here, there's a spreadsheet here that's been created. Not terribly exciting in terms of formatting, but this, if I hit save, no, I'm not going to hit save, sorry, hit update, this now is become part of my project. It doesn't look so healthy, does it? Let me try that again. Get out of that view. I think that's the problem. Okay. Now, Murphy's law of doing a demonstration is that this will work perfectly until I demonstrate it to someone, and then it won't work. It's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. But anyway, it did work. There you go. So it actually was correct. Now, if I was to go into Excel and make changes to that formatting and then update that, then that will be reflected in the update that I do here. So I guess it is a great tool. Obviously, you just got to be aware of the fact that it's not a live link to, I'll get out of that view again, sorry. So it's not a live link to the spreadsheet. And I'm guessing that's simply just a limitation in the Revit API that would prevent that from happening. But you can see that it's now in red. So if I update that and go back, and it didn't work. So let's just do it again. If at first you don't succeed, run away. There you go. Look at that. It did work. Excellent. So twice as a charm, as they say in the movies. Okay, let's go back to the plan view. There's a whole heap of alignment tools here. I'll just use this one. Align left. Click that object. and then click that object, and then click that one and that one. Hit escape to get out of the command. So, if anybody's ever tried to use the align command on a piece of text, will realize how much time that's just saved. This is this to uppercase to lowercase tool, very simple. So a lot of these tools are already available in I guess, as third-party add-ons for free or even for purchase, but they're not together in one sort of suite like this is. That's one of the other beauties of all this. You don't have all these desperate sort of add-ons all over the place. Okay, let's go to the renumber tool, and I'm going to renumber by room. So you can see here that I've got doors. I'm going to say use the to room, the room that they're leading into, to designate what the room number should be. I'm going to put a separator in there just to visually break that up, and I'll hit OK. So that room there is room 101, as you can see, and that's door A in room 101. That's in room 103 and so forth. Interestingly, this room has 2 doors, so it's just added to the sequence to call that 106B. Back to the renumber mark parameter. I'll just say I want to do A. So I click on the actual door itself. So that's not an automated tool, but it gives you, I guess, the highest degree of control because you're actually manually picking the numbers themselves. Renumber grid is another tool which, because I've already got grids with some numbers and letters in them, it will restrict what I can actually use that tool to do in this instance. But that's just a very quick way of renumbering grids, which might save you a few minutes. Renumbering rooms, renumbering views on sheets, that's another set of tools. Material legend, as the screenshot there, or as that little animation shows, it's a way of creating a legend that actually shows the detail or projection view that you would see of a material, and it creates it in an empty drafting view. This one here, I think, is certainly very powerful, though, the legend by category I've mentioned before. So if I just go down here to start off with, I've just created a legend view which is empty except for this single little object, which you actually have to place into it in order to run the command. Don't ask me why. Legend by category. Let's say we want to show all the furniture. You can change the layout here. You can change the legend view. So if you've created legends in Revit, you'll be familiar with this sort of information. What you won't be familiar with, though, from doing legends in Revit is this sort of stuff. So I can add in a family and type. I can add in cost. I can add in, where's manufacturer? There it is, going blind. Excuse me, but what this will also do, though, is it will add in the quantities automatically for me, and as per any schedule, I can rename translation. So cost, I'll leave that as it is, and that in Australian parlance would probably be more likely to be called quantity. And all that sort of stuff. So it's the same as any sort of schedule. So I'll click OK. Generates it. I might just change the view scale to 1 to 100, and then I'll rerun the command exactly as it is, just to make everything fit a bit nicer. Okay. So that is, as you can see, that might get some of you guys in the audience a little bit excited by seeing that, or maybe I'm just too easily excited. There you go. But This, one of the things you just got to remember is that you do have to refresh this if there are changes to quantities in the database. It's just, unfortunately, because of the way that the Revit API, the add-ons work in Revit, it's just one of those restrictions that the developers have to work around. So I can redo this and I can say I want to group everything by manufacturer, for example. And I can place this on a sheet as normal. Okay, draw a binding box. If I select an element, I can click draw binding box, and that draws a line around the element. That may be of some use for, perhaps it's only of limited usage, but there may be scenarios where that's useful to you. If I select that floor and delete it, there is no floor there now anymore. And I run this room to floor command. So I want to make a new floor of a particular type. Let's make it in situ 225. I'll put it on level 1, no offset. We'll set it to the finish, and we'll not take doors into account. There you go. If you've got multiple rooms that touch each other, then by clicking on union floors, then instead of ending up with 20 little slabs, you can actually consolidate them all into one big slab. So I've now got my new whiz-bang floor underneath my room. Okay, edit grid names. Is just a really quick way of updating names. So that might be of some use as well. You can actually, I think the only thing you can actually do in there is just change the grade name. Actually, all those other fields are basically read only. Okay, multi-join. If you are involved in joining up objects, this essentially just allows you, joining geometry I should say, this just allows you to choose the priority in which the object is joined. Nothing really super duper there. Some of these tools do actually, this one here for example, does replicate what's already in the modify. Resize section box is quite interesting. So for example, I can say that I want to resize the section box so it's only going to show me all my rooms on level 1, or all my rooms in the project, which is a nice way of cutting that up. So I can also choose grids. I can also choose a view, which is basically pretty much what's already in Revit anyway, but it's just a nice neat little way of getting to all those different settings. So you can also manually change the section box as well, but certainly this using the rooms command is quite interesting because it actually allows you just to hone in on the actual rooms. And you can also select objects and get it to resize to objects that you pick. Now the toggle, if I just have a quick look at this one, category toggle. Well, let's just say, for example, that I had developed a sudden hatred for Revit entourage objects, and I wanted to hide them in all of my 3D views. Don't ask me why, it's not a rational sort of thing. So if I click the off button there, and then pick all of those 3D views and hit apply, you can see the entourage has disappeared there. I can rest easy now. And if I click on and hit apply, then that's now switched those on in all those views. So that again might be a tool that you don't use terribly often, but it's certainly maybe of some use to you as a way of controlling the visibility of categories in multiple views in one hit. The off and on commands that are just beneath that are effectively just a shortcut to the visibility graphics overrides. So if I wanted to switch off all my doors, for example, and switch off walls, I can do that here. So there's really nothing, spectacular happening there, but it is just a shortcut rather than right-clicking and then going hide in view category. So it's just a little bit quicker. That one. Okay, so continuing on, the zoom to. Well, the zoom to command in Revit already exists, but sometimes it's a little bit iffy. So it won't exactly zoom to the selection that you actually pick. At least that's been my experience. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is a lot more precise in terms of zooming to a specific object. So if you do zoom to selection in Revit, it can be a little bit hit and miss, whereas the zoom to here, I think, is an awful lot more precise. Okay, crop region. We've got, let's see, crop region from selection. Let's just try that one actually. Put a little bit of an offset in there. And you can see now that that's actually taken those objects and put a crop region in there. So you'll see there's a few different ways of doing that. There's even the ability to take crop regions and match them between two different views. Room views. This is one that I think potentially has a lot of. It could be very powerful for people. Large-scale projects where everything's organized by room, like health, for example, education. If I pick all of my rooms on level 1 and then say that I want to create elevations of each room, if I've got multiple types of elevations, I can pick whichever one I want, which means that if I have a view with a view template and I pick it here in the list, it saves me a bit of work because these new elevation views that get created will automatically have that view template applied. So we'll just click OK, and you can see now that I've got all of these views here, and just change them all to say 1 to 50. So now I've got all these little discrete elevation views of each of my floors, each of my rooms, and I could have also created floor plans for each one as well if that was applicable. View depth override. Now that's actually been in the Revit XT tools for a while, and it was in there before Autodesk added it in. I think it was in 2016, 2017. It works a little bit differently to the Revit built-in one, so have a look at it, see if you like it better or don't like it better, but it's just an alternative. They've kept it in there. It does work, I believe, slightly differently. Okay, selection tools. Try that again. So selection tools allow me to choose a whole heap of criteria with regards to selecting. So let's just say if I select that and say I want to see if this will work, see if I can select the, no it didn't because it doesn't regard that as a host. Try and find an example of one that works. Let's try host. There you go. Okay, so it's looked at that family there, the door family, and said, right, well that's hosted in that wall, and let's pick the host. So there's a whole heap of different criteria for picking. So just very quickly pick the door again, select by family, project and view. Well, that's pretty much what you've got already in Revit. So there's a few there. Just again, have a look through them, see if there's anything there that that is of use to you. The filter selection tool, if you've gone through and grabbed a whole heap of stuff like that in Revit in the past and you've gone to the standard filter tool, you'll see it's a pretty brute force sort of methodology of deselecting things. The filter tool in Revit XT is a lot more sophisticated. So you can see that I can get down to this sort of level of precision in terms of picking things. So if I go uncheck all and then pick all my curtain panels, for example, of that type, then that will pick only those curtain wall panels. So as you can see there, it gets down to a very high level of precision. The modeless selection tool allows me to use a number of different criteria. So if I wanted to pick things from just a certain level, just level 1 for example, you can see there that it's now grabbed all of those things. And if I say I only want to select rooms that are constrained, well, actually I'll just untick that. No, okay. So if I just want to select rooms from that level, then it's selecting them. It's not filtering, it's actually creating a selection. So that's a very powerful one. You've got select by work sets, for example, and phase, which could be very useful. So you can say I want to only select curtain panels that are associated with a certain room, for example, living room. So if I say I want to select all the furniture that's in living room 1, level 1, then better undo that. Then that will actually let's try kitchen and dining, level 1. Okay, there you go. So it's selected all of the furniture and doors and everything inside that particular room. Okay, let's just keep going here. So very quickly, I'll just finish this tab. The About tool is really more of where you look at the licensing of the product and activate it. The settings. When we looked at those BIM query tools, you can see that Revit was showing us a whole heap of different parameters. This is just a way of, I guess, reducing the amount of information that it's going to present. When in BIM query, by the way, when Revit has a yes/no parameter, it represents yes as a 1 and it represents no as a 0, which is binary. Of course, all computer programs are based on binary. And you can also filter out the alphabetical sequences that it uses when you're renumbering things, like when we looked at the grids, for example, and the doors. So that's just a little bit of that. Very quickly, Content Admin Kit is going to be looking at the calculated parameters. It allows you to manage your shared parameters. Calculated parameters are interesting. I guess you could call this almost a little bit like it's sort of a light version of some of the other tools that you can use to actually get into the database and interrogate objects. So, for example, you can see there's a rule here called colorize curtain panels which are wider than 500. So this is the parameter here that you're creating. That's the rule name. You just give that a name that means something. Pick the category of objects you want to apply it to. So if you've got from model, it means it will pick everything in the model in one hit when you run the rule. If you pick this one, and obviously it's only going to pick things that are in the active view, but it also, you can set it so that you select everything first and then it runs the rule based on the selection set that you've made. So this is basically going to say if the width of the object, the curtain panel, is less than, it would be 500, isn't it? Then make it 25500, which is an RGB color, which is effectively red. Report duct size, so that's a parameter that allows you to select the number of ducts and then work out what the length of them is together. Fire rating, so if I run this one, for example, here's a good example. Now, if I look at my windows at the moment, let's see if I can find one. There you go. So at the moment, there's no information in there to do with fire rating. If I look at the wall and I go to fire rating, and make that 90, 90, 90. So what I can actually do is run that rule, and that rule will actually push the information from the host into the window. So if I just go fire rating from wall, it says look at the value in the host for fire rating, and then it will apply that to the window. So we'll just click OK. Now that's not running the rule yet. We go execute, and then we go fire rating from wall. Click on the window, and here we go. So it's pushed it into comments, but that's effectively taken that value from the wall. Try again. That value from the wall, and it's pushed it into the window. So you can see there's actually quite a number of different sort of rules that you can create, and it uses the same sort of programming language as you'd see in Dynamo, for example. Family reporting tools. If you are in the business of working on Revit families, this could be a very, very powerful tool. The BIM Content tool just allows you to create a pre-made library for all your users of Revit content. So if you've got some Revit families that you want people to be able to access really quickly, that might be of some use. Update categories. If you had a whole stack of Revit families and you wanted to do things like change them. So if you've got like 2015 families and you want to bring them into 2016, I believe it was in 2016 that they brought in this thing called the room calculation point. Doing that manually would involve opening up every single Revit family and enabling that parameter and then saving it again. If I've got a whole library full of my content, I can just find the path to it, and then I can tell Revit XT to update so that they have that parameter built in. So that's a very, very powerful. So I've got a few questions that have popped up there, which I'll go through. Fran has asked the question about are those schedules static or live linked? Well, I think I might have already mentioned that in these cases, the BIM query and the import, those are not live links. So that is, I guess, one thing that might temper people's excitement a little bit. It's just I think it's got a lot to do with restrictions inside the Revit API, and it's just, I think when they created the Revit API, Autodesk was very conscious of, I guess, protecting the database in the respect that it could be quite easy to run a routine that might corrupt a Revit database, which is obviously not a good thing. So they've made the database very, very not very restricted, but they've restricted it in certain ways, I guess, to safeguard the database, and that being one of them. Okay, does anybody else have any questions at all? Okay, someone's mentioned there about yes, sorry, Holger. Yes, this webinar will be available. If you ask your business development manager, they can send you a link so that people can watch this video afterwards. Matthew's asked about the parameter manager. Fortunately, due to time restraints, can't really go over it too much, but essentially the shared parameter manager allows me to very quickly create shared parameters. It's just more of it's just a nice graphical interface that allows me to add new parameters, I guess, in a slightly quicker way. Once I've added them in, though, I can then go to the parameter manager and then push that information into the project database. I don't think there's anything in here that's really different to what's already available in Revit, but I think it's just a slightly nicer, more elegant way of accessing that part of the Revit functionality. Okay, well, I don't think anybody's got any more questions, so I'd like to again thank you all for your time. Again, appreciate that an hour of people's days is a very big chunk of the day, so I'd like to thank you all for attending, and as I said, there will be a link available if you'd like to rewatch this webinar at some point or give the link to other people in your office. Thank you very much. See ya.